This video is about the relationship with Mr. Marc Anthony, married from 2004 to 2011, presenting or representing her third and longest marriage, as well as the only marriage within which she's had children. Now, if you're not familiar with Marc Anthony, you're missing a lot. He's actually pretty amazing, and I recommend going to Wikipedia and looking up his list of achievements because they're literally longer than I am tall. But in brief, here's some real quick information about Mr. Mr. Marc Anthony. Okay, so his original given name is Marco Antonio Muñiz. He is an American singer, songwriter, actor. He's been in television shows and movies with speaking parts, record executive, television producer, and philanthropist. He is a top-selling tropical salsa artist of all time, 3-time Grammy Award winner and 6-time Latin Grammy Award winner, as well as being a recipient of many Lifetime Achievement Awards. This guy is no joke. He is tiny but mighty. So he really brings the juice. He's got a lot of power behind this modest, unassuming exterior. And it's interesting because when you look at his chart, he's got all this Virgo, right? You're like, oh my God, well, what can you possibly say about somebody with that much Virgo? But there's a lot, and he's actually a very complex and interesting character as a result of this. So let's unpack the chart and take a look, and let's see what happened with the only marriage that's lasted more than 6 weeks with her. This is Marc Anthony. I know, we all thought the same thing when they got married, like, really? Okay, well, that's unexpected. Because Jennifer does have a predisposition or a penchant for pretty boys and big guys and really muscular guys. And Marc Anthony is the classic stellium in Virgo. He is such a Virgo boy. There's a lot of good to be said about Virgo boys. And he certainly has his charms. But when we think of superficial pairings, like just on the surface, like these two are not the couple we would have expected to be together. Okay, so who is Marc Anthony? What are we working with here, right? So first thing is, holy cow, what a stellium, what a stellium, oh my God. Only an astrologer who has a particular fondness for Virgo boys could get this excited about somebody having these many planets in Virgo. So the first thing is he's got a Sun-Pluto conjunction tight, almost exact. It's within 1 degree in Virgo. This in and of itself makes him a powerhouse. This is somebody who, had they not gone into entertainment, could have easily been a spy, a detective, just an amazing crime solver. Sun-Pluto in Virgo like this is always the specialist. If there's a way to do it better and more efficiently, they're going to find it, because they know that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, but that's not always the most efficient route. Oh my gosh. So when you need somebody who's going to be able to drill down to the tiniest parts, right, to take something apart, disassemble it, put it back together again, and be able to do it quickly, efficiently, and better than other people, Sun, Pluto, and Virgo is the person you want to go to. They're a little scary like that, so I wouldn't mess with them. Now, with this, we also have Jupiter with this Sun-Pluto conjunction. Now, I'm not seeing anything about his personal history, but Sun-Pluto-Jupiter in Virgo typically or customarily is associated with military or special ops or very highly specialized technical fields. So I don't know that this is actually part of his history, and if you guys know something I don't, please put it in the comments below. But there would certainly be an affinity to like this very organized, clean line, like highly analytical, focused, like top tier status operations for him, and he would bring that energy to everything he gets involved in. So it's no wonder that this guy's got a list of achievements longer than I am tall. And then, because boys and girls, it's just not enough. It's just not enough. No, we have Uranus added to this mix. So add to the Sun-Pluto-Jupiter conjunction in Virgo, which is making him not just an uber Virgo, like a super Virgo. You know, like Wile E. Coyote is a super genius. Only this is better. We also have Uranus added to this mix, which means that I can almost guarantee you that this man has a skyrocket IQ. All right, he's got an IQ literally like off the charts, for lack of better description. And his mind works faster than he's able to speak, move, or process. So that can be challenging. Now, with all this Virgo, especially for him, what this is going to show up as in his life is this is somebody who's probably, I don't know because I don't live with him, but I'm just saying he's probably more than likely an insomniac. He has a lot of difficulty sleeping, and when he does sleep, he probably has irregular sleep patterns. So he sleeps hard and deep for long periods of time, and then he's up and awake and moving for long periods of time, or he sleeps in fits and starts, right? So he's more prone to napping than actually, doing the whole 6 to 8 hour sleep like other people. And also too, this is not somebody who's really, who has a huge penchant for sleeping. There's too much going on. Their brains are too active. So they literally get just enough sleep to give their brains a rest, like, cooling down the engine of a car. And then they're right back on top of it. Because there's this high-speed brain, like for him, it's a super high-speed brain. So take the words high-speed brain and add super in front of it, and that's what we have with him. It makes it extremely difficult for him to switch off and just be normal. So, the thing about it is, while this on the one hand makes him fascinating, right, and exceptional, literally exceptional on a lot of levels, the other side of this is that it can make him extremely difficult to live with, because he would have extremely high standards for himself, which means that he would also have fairly high standards for the people around him, although honestly, you wouldn't believe it, but he sets reasonable standards for them because he takes into consideration, because Virgo's a realist, they take into consideration the limitations of people around them, their actual limitations, not their spoken limitations. So they don't care what you think your limitations are, they actually know what your limitations really are, and that's what they hold you to, which is different from what they hold themselves to. They've got a much higher standard for themselves. The thing about it, though, is with all this Virgo and this, Lord, Sun, Uranus, Pluto, and Jupiter all packed tight in Virgo like this, there's a couple of things you should know. One, they're very high strung, and that's a no-brainer. We know that. But they're also very thin-skinned, so they're hyper irritable. It's very easy to make them crazy. They don't have a lot of tolerance for things that other people don't even think about. So, for example, if he were sound sensitive, right, like he would be hyper sound sensitive. So the sound of TVs going and noise and chatter and all around him all the time would make him nuts. He would need silence, a lot of it. If he's what is the word that I'm looking for? If he is sensitive to smells, right? Perfumes, even the smallest amount of perfume can be something that really irritates him because he would be hypersensitive to it. So this whole train of Virgo planets in his chart, especially with these outer planets involved, also indicate a hypersensitivity or hyper-irritability to things, which can make it a little difficult to live with him because he will forget that he's easily irritated, or he won't be able to express himself as calmly as normal people would, because he's so hyper irritable, and because he moves and speaks faster than he's thinking, or he's thinking faster than he moves or speak. Sometimes there's a disconnect between what he's thinking and what's coming out of his mouth, which can often come out as very abrupt or cruel or cutting. But at the end of the day, what it is just really blunt and honest. And listen, there's a lot of things I want in my house and my relationship. I'm thinking blunt and honest is probably not something I want to live with on a daily basis. That, combined with the fact that all that Virgo and all that Pluto and Jupiter and Uranus makes him super hyper detail oriented. Literally, he will find, see, and remember the smallest things that are the most embarrassing or humiliating or crippling for you. And if you piss them off, and this is true for all Virgos, if you piss a Virgo off, they will remember that thing that's going to cut the deepest, and they will literally, if you've pushed them this far, they will bring you to your knees in 5 sentences or less. Right? Sometimes 3 words or less. You don't want to push Virgos in the corners like that, because that thing you thought nobody's paying attention to, that even you forgot about, no, Virgo saw it and they remember it, and now they're going to tell you about it. So you can imagine with this guy and his sniper vision when it comes to people's flaws and shortcomings and things that they thought they were getting away with, that he kind of files away in his memory. You don't want that being brought back up. Wait. So yeah, he can be a little challenging to live with. So you're listening to this, you're like, well, good God, who on earth would, he's been in multiple relationships, like who on earth would put up with this? I mean, listen, money aside, and maybe he's tucking it in his sock, we don't know, but even with all that, like who on earth would ever put up with this? There's got to be some redeeming quality, right? Well, there is. Here's the thing. He has Mercury and Venus in Libra. Now remember, a planet in its rulership, right, or in its own sign is always going to be stronger. So with him, this Venus in Libra, okay, is going to make all those beautiful Venusian characteristics even more strong. So this Mercury-Venus shows up in a couple of ways. On the one side, with Mercury and Venus together, it makes for a very pleasant speaking voice, or the ability to be very charming in our communications, which as a singer, songwriter, actor, makes all kinds of sense. Also, more importantly, as a producer versus director, having people skills and be able to communicate effectively with other people in very diplomatic, delicate ways is absolutely instrumental in getting people to do what you want them to do. So that's where we see this beautiful Mercury-Venus combination, and with Venus exceptionally strong in Libra right there. The other thing with Mercury-Venus together like that is he also will know what to say to you to smooth ruffled feathers and to make you feel better about something and to calm you down and to make you feel like the most important person in the world. So when it comes to sweet talking people, literally back off the ledge, don't jump, or soothing the savage beast, he has a gift with knowing what to say and how to say it and when to say it and who to say it to get the maximum effect desired, right? So right there with this combination of things and all that Virgo, you can tell already he's a dangerous, dangerous guy. I mean, there's a expression they call like rico suave. Oh, honey, you got nothing on this one. So when you look at this guy and you think to yourself, like, really? Him and her? Really? Like, she could have anybody. Like, was it just the money? Is he some kind of anatomical freak? What is it? Understand that when it comes to the acquisition of a target, he will go after it with the precision and careful thinking and planning of a special ops, like military person, right? Like he is up there. The other thing is with all this Venus and Virgo together, all this Venus, this Libra and Virgo together, this emphasized Venus, this also makes him very, very seductive, very smooth. This guy, I'm not going to say he's a player, but he's definitely an operator. And much like Don Juan, who is reported once to have seduced a nun in his many conquests, this guy is literally in league with Don Juan, the classic Don Juan, the myth, the man, the legend. So, whew. Don't let looks fool you. He knows how to make things work, and he knows how to melt icy cold hearts. Oh my, I love Virgos. Can't live with them, but I love them. Okay, so we've got that. Now, what else do we have here, right? Well, the other thing too is he's got Moon in Cancer. He's a nurturer, and that Moon in Cancer sets up a nice sextile to those Virgo planets. So everything he does, because remember, Pluto and Uranus are transpersonal planets, so they can be extremely difficult to carry in a chart, and also they can be very easily misused in this lifetime. Because Uranus tends to fly in the face of convention and only plays by its own rules and doesn't really give a flying quack what other people think. Uranus is here to break the rules, and make new ground, as it were. And they're always, always, always traveling to the beat of their own drummer, which can be good or bad depending on which side of them you're standing on as they're marching. Because if you're standing in front of them as they're marching to the beat of their own drummer, they're just as likely to march right on over you. So it's a transpersonal planet. It's tricky to work with. It's very easily misused in this lifetime. So people with transpersonal planets conjunct their personal ones have very, very heavy crosses to bear in this lifetime, because they've got to get it right. They've got to get it right. It's literally having a transpersonal planet attached to your personal planets is like trying to ride a bucking bronco. You've got to stay on top of it, or it's going to throw you and take you and your life for a ride, right? So it's about who's in control when it comes to your personal nature, right? You know, your ego, you know, or your higher calling. And where Uranus is concerned, I'm going to give you an example of how easily misused Uranus or outer planets can be, right? Our last president, the orange-haired baboon, had Uranus conjunct the sun. And remember, Uranus plays by its own rules. It flies in the face of convention. It doesn't care what other people think. It's often very blunt or disruptive, and often moves in directions it wants to and marches to the beat of its own drummer. And if you happen to be in the way, that's too bad. It's going to march right on over you as they do their thing. And that's exactly what we saw a lot of. We did not see the higher manifestation of Uranus with that particular person, because that would have required actual work, effort, and discipline. Marc Anthony, with the Sun-Uranus conjunction in Virgo, is here to be of service to the greater good and to the community at large, whatever community he finds himself a part of. So as long as he's acting with integrity and for higher principles when it comes to the greater good or the good of the community, he's manifesting and acting through the highest expression of that transpersonal planet, which is fantastic. But it's a challenge because, like a bucking bronco, man, you've got to stay on top of it with a good solid grip the entire time, or you're going to get thrown and trampled. But in Marc Anthony's case, not only does he have this Uranus, he's also got that Pluto flanking his sun from the other side. So I'm not going to get too much into the Pluto transpersonal aspects, so that's literally a whole conversation by itself. But needless to say, the demands for integrity and character and doing the right thing and for the greater good, and also recognizing that a lot, and this is Pluto specifically, understanding that a lot of your experience in this lifetime have everything to do with being an example for other people, right? Or being a catalyst for other people. So where Pluto is connected to personal planets, often the person, whether they like it or not, are being used by the great divine universe, or a catalyst, you know, in a much bigger picture sort of thing where large bodies of people are involved. And there's no way to know ahead of time what your role is in a given situation. It is literally fate. That Pluto is the planet of fate when it's hooked up into personal planets. And when your time comes that you are to play your part, you're going to play your part whether you are aware of what's happening or not. So there's a greater destiny involved. And contrary to the romantic ideas about destiny, it's not something you know ahead of time, it's not easy, and it's not all glory. So, and this is what this poor guy carries, and it's in Virgo, so everything he does is about the greater good and being of service to the greater good. Whee! Now, luckily, that moon is very strong in Cancer, and it's sextiling those planets, so this is going to give him a more nurturing nature. It is his nature, and feels the best for him to be able to do things that help people. He wants to create better feelings and good things for people. He wants people to be fed and happy. So that's a beautiful thing. And also, too, with that moon in Cancer, he has really good relations with women, right? Women love him. Love him. Remember all that Venus we were talking about? Mr. Rico Suave. Well, ladies and gentlemen, yes, women love him. He is such a ladies' man. His mama raised him right. Okay. So, now, some other things. The moon in his chart also makes a trine to his Neptune. Now, we don't have a time of birth for him. Okay, literally, we have no idea what time he was born, so we're just using the planets. With a moon trine Neptune, it's going to give him a rich imagination. It's going to give him a very soft nature, which is fantastic considering all these hard planets. With his sun, he can be, don't you kid yourself, he can be a brute. This is not somebody you want to get on the bad side of, right? Trust me when I tell you, you do not want to get on his bad side. Luckily for us, his general nature is very sweet and kind and gentle and imaginative and romantic. It's not his nature to run around hurting people. or being a brute or anything like that. He's capable of it, and in far greater ways than the rest of us could possibly even hope to aspire to. But that's a part of him he keeps tightly controlled under wraps. This Moon Neptune trine is what we're seeing with the film and the writing and the artistic stuff. So thank God for all of us. He's found a healthy, creative outlet for the better sides of himself. Okay, now also too, this moon sets up a square to Mercury and Venus. So this creates a bit of a two-sided challenge. So on the one hand, it's going to emphasize his delight in seducing women or men, depending on what your choice is. My understanding is he's heterosexual, so for him it would be women. He loves seducing women. He loves the game of romance. He loves these things. That's a great thing. Well, if you're the recipient of it. With the moon squaring Mercury and Venus, however, on the other side of that is a tendency or a difficulty expressing their genuine feelings. So he is very sensitive, and he would rather distract and disarm and charm you than deal with things that upset him. One of the things that you're going to find with him, because he's got Saturn and Aries down here, right? So he's basically got a T-square happening. Is that he is very conflict avoidant. He does not like arguments. He does not like screaming, yelling. He does not like violence. He might, and by the way, he's very good at these things. When it comes to psychological or physical violence, he's very good at these things naturally. Luckily for us and everyone around him, he doesn't like that. He doesn't like that about himself, and he doesn't like to be involved in that. He's very conflict avoidant. So what will happen when he is uncomfortable or when he's feeling backed into a corner, oftentimes his best solution is always going to be to disarm and charm, right? To soothe the savage beast, to find a way to change the subject, to try and make everything nice again, because he doesn't want to get. We don't need to fight. We're not going to argue. There's better ways to handle this, and there's a time and a place, and this is neither. So when it comes to what he's really feeling, and he will hang on to those feelings forever. This guy can hold a grudge for freaking eternity. But when it comes to the things that really matter to him, because he's very sensitive, and the things that really hurt him, because he's very sensitive, he's going to have a very difficult time expressing that, and he will hang on to guilt and hurt forever and bottle it up and bottle it up and bottle it up. And anybody who knows anything about mental and emotional health knows that bottling things up is not healthy. That just leads to bigger problems later, right? And often taking it on people that had nothing to do with the original source of the pain that you're trying to not deal with, as it were. So there's that. I want to come back to this Saturn and Aries in a second. So let me just leave that right there. Okay, now he has Mars and Leo, and again, Mr. Romance. He's very flamboyant. He's very generous. He loves being happy. He likes entertaining. All those wonderful things that come with Mars and Leo. Very splashy, flashy, colorful. It's all the good stuff. Now, I point this out because, again, when we think of Virgo, we think of somebody very understated, very modest, those humble Virgos, and we don't think of leonine qualities. But here's the thing. With all this Virgo, one, it's going to make him a workaholic. And that's the other thing. Part of his conflict avoidance is when he's really feeling under pressure or stressed out or angry, he will bury himself in his work. He literally can spend his entire life he would sleep at his job if he could get away with it, right? So one of the ways he avoids dealing with problems is he just buries himself in his work and just physically removes himself from your access or access to you, so he can try and sort things out. Now, the thing about all this Virgo is that he will sort out his problems while he's keeping busy. So for him, the best thing to do to get him to figure out how to work through a problem is to let him go work on something else, and he'll eventually sort it out that way. But he has a propensity to be a workaholic. So we're looking at this. So it's like, okay, well, we know Virgo, we know all that about Virgo. There's nothing flashy, flamboyant, or whatever there. What is that about? Well, the Mars and Leo, what that means is that when he does, because he's a perfectionist, so when he does anything that he does, it's going to be as close to a high or almost perfect standard as he can get. And the other thing is that underneath all of that is still the performer. He still loves applause and praise. And Virgo is not known for being a warm, effusive, cuddly planet. That Mars in Leo, however, especially with that moon in Cancer, but especially that Mars in Leo, gives him a warmth and an affectionate nature that we wouldn't see otherwise with this heavy emphasis in Virgo. So, yay, team. Now, let's get down here to the Saturn in Aries. So he's got this Saturn in Aries and it's retrograde, but no matter what, it's still Saturn in Aries. Now the thing with Saturn in Aries is conflict avoidant. They don't like conflict. Saturn in Aries is a tough placement in its lifetime because Saturn in Aries is learning how to be brave, right? And the thing about it is, you know, when you and I think of brave, we think of one thing, but for the person who has Saturn in Aries, it's a completely different kind of courage. With Saturn in Aries, a lot of it has to do with being brave enough to stand alone with your principles or to champion the underdog, which could be yourself, you know, or simply just to stand up for yourself. With his chart, he's, as a general rule, like with his chart, he is a very gentle, laid back, non-domineering kind of guy. Now, in this day and age, with BDSM being the big buzz phrase that everybody thinks they're going to do pop psychology with, oftentimes men who are gentle or passive now are often mislabeled as submissive, and that's not true at all. Believe me, honey, this guy is not submissive. This is to say, though, that his nature is one that he is much more laid back and much more comfortable allowing other people to take the lead and do what they need to do and be loud and brash and, you know, out under the spotlight. If that's what they need to do, he will let them have that. He's not uncomfortable with that, and it doesn't upset him or bring up the competitive side. None of that. He's totally good with it. The problem here, though, is with all of this gentle, modest, you know, kind of laid back, take the back seat sort of nature on the surface, and this absolute avoidance of conflict. He does not like it at all, right? It can lead other people, louder, noisier people, to believe that he is a weak character, or that he is a submissive, or that he is a pushover. And none of these things are true. So the thing about it is, in situations like that, where you have somebody who has an unhealthy ego, right, that doesn't, or a complete lack of maturity in a relationship, oftentimes what they will do is they will push and push and push, or rather, in his case, they will bounce and stress test his patience and his tolerance and his ability to put up with things over and over and over again until finally he snaps, you know. And then of course he'll go overboard with, you know, the self-defense, or the, you know, the roaring roar kind of thing, and scare the crap out of people. And this is where accusations of being abusive, or, you know, being mean or cruel, whatever, comes through. Because people didn't see the days, weeks, and months of stress testing his nerves, right, and pushing those boundaries over and over and over again, because you thought you could get away with it because he's worked so hard to try and avoid conflict, right? So there's that thing. So it's an interesting thing, and it's a tough placement to have Saturn in Aries, especially if you're a man, because so much of manhood is built around this whole macho image, right? So that's our friend Marc Anthony. He's quite the interesting character, You'd never know to look at him because, like any true Virgo, he's very modest and kind of underplayed in appearance. Like there's nothing huge and big and splashy when you first see him. All right, so let's look at these two people together, because that's really what we're here to do, right? We're looking at the relationship between these two and what on earth could have possibly brought them together. So the first thing is, we know that Jennifer Lopez does not like being alone. She does not like being alone so much that there's literally not a crack of sunlight between her and a breakup and the next partner. Like, I don't know trains that move faster than she does, but that's a whole other conversation. So let's look at these charts together. Well, I looked at the chart, I looked again, and I looked again, and I looked again, trying to find connections between the chart. I'm not finding a lot of them. And that doesn't make any sense for people who got married, represent the longest marriage she's ever had, and had kids, right? You would expect to see a lot more aspects between them, a lot more connections between the chart. Here's what we did find. So the first thing is his Sun, Pluto, Jupiter, Uranus quadruple stellium in Virgo. The only aspect we can find that it makes is conjuncting her Pluto and South Node. That's literally not enough to make a marriage with, much less a relationship. That beautiful, Mr. Don Juan, Mercury-Venus trine. Now, it is trining her Venus, so there is a lot of sympathetic pleasure. They enjoy the same things. He certainly knows how to seduce her because all that Mercury-Venus in him trining her Venus, he knows how to speak the language that will loosen her up and get her to let down her guard. Now, he has his Sun, Uranus, Pluto sextile. Yes, sorry. He has, no, that's not right. What am I saying? Oh, I swear, some days I can't read my own notes. His Sun, Uranus, and Pluto, because his Jupiter's a little further out, sorry about that, is sextiling her Mars. So again, this makes it easier for them to work together. Dancing would be very easy for them as well. But their ability to coordinate and work together to achieve goals and get stuff done is very, very easy. But again, this is not enough. That's not enough to make a marriage with. And finally, I'm literally combing through this chart trying to find something a little bit more substantial that you could actually build a marriage with, right? Something that would explain getting married in the first place. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe the moon, depending on where her moon is anti-Sia his Venus. Maybe, possibly. Well, I don't know. But, I mean, at this point, we're literally we're stretching, desperately trying to find something. So basically, I give up. Maybe there's hard aspects between them. Maybe there's like a whole ton of hard, challenging aspects that created enough tension that brought them together, right? Maybe. So let's take a look. Maybe that's where it's hiding. And here's what we found. That quadruple stellium, Sun, Uranus, Pluto, Jupiter in Virgo that he carries, that powerhouse combination of things, it is squaring her Venus. So his very nature, the very essential nature of Marc Anthony literally gets on her nerves. So this right here, I can't think of a more challenging aspect, especially with such a heavy emphasis like this clustered around your Sun. I can't think of anything that is more difficult to have in a relationship. I don't know how they managed to get through their dates. But again, remember, he is Mr. Smooth. Mr. Don Juan could literally seduce a nun. So if he had decided that he wanted her temporarily or permanently, like, it would not have been that difficult for him to go over and bypass all of the concerns and objections she might have had. But at the end of the day, you can't stop being who you are. You're always going to be who you are. So once all the fun and games and foreplay and seduction is over, you get back to the business of being yourself. And that's when this like, oh my God, this breathing thing that you're doing in and out, will you stop breathing? That's when that level of annoyance with somebody just being themselves comes in. So that's not going to make a marriage. Then, okay, so what else is going on here? Well, we've got Mars square Moon, and that's definitely not something you want to build a marriage with, right? Mars square Moon. Now, it is also squaring her Neptune and her Mars, because her Neptune and Mars are there as well. But mostly it's the Moon that we're concerned about, because her Moon is still going to square that Mars no matter where it is. So Mars is a fiery, aggressive, masculine planet. The Moon is soft and moist and sensitive, like a big old marshmallow. When you have Mars squaring the Moon, when Mars is being expressed, when his Mars is being expressed, it can be perceived or experienced by her as very upsetting or overbearing, very domineering, like overly domineering. So you and I might not see anything wrong with what he said or did. Like, that didn't bother me. But for her, the way she's experiencing it is like, oh my God, how would you be so mean? Also to remember, his Mars, remember her Mars is down here too, is also squaring her Mars. So Mars-Mars squares also lend itself to competitive energy between partners. If you guys are in like some type of picnic competition, like a three-legged race with other people, or relays or something, if you're playing competitive games, that Mars square Mars is a great combination to have, because you'll constantly spur each other on to try and beat the other one. So you'll achieve great things if the nature of the relationship benefits from competitiveness. In a marriage, however, that is not the case here. So again, so far we're batting 2 for 2. The only two aspects I can find between the charts right now, the only two connections I can find are really bad ones for marriage. So I'm searching, well, do we have anything else? Anything else? For the love of God, is there anything else in this chart that makes sense, that would bring two people together to get married, right? Well, we have Chiron opposing Jupiter and Uranus. Okay, so we have Chiron down here opposing Jupiter and Uranus over here. And again, it's not enough. It's not enough. I mean, Chiron is a growth point. There are things that go with Chiron that are necessary for growth and healing, but this is not what you build marriages with. Jupiter and Uranus are freedom-loving planets. There's nothing about Jupiter and Uranus that lends itself to Saturnine things like commitment and marriage. So this also is not on the table or conducive to marriage. So what the heck? And literally, I went back and checked the charts again in case I missed something, and nope, didn't find it. Can't find it in good aspects, can't find it in bad aspects. I'm literally finding barely a handful of aspects. I literally have barely enough aspects between these charts to even make like a plate of spaghetti with. Like, I don't get it, right? So this picture is literally my expression at this point. All right, so now we're really reaching, like, we're digging deep into this bag. There's got to be something in here, for God's sakes. There's got to be something. This makes no sense, And I even checked the birth dates to make sure I've got the right birth dates. Like, I'm not kidding you, and I tell you, I was searching for something that makes sense why these two got married. So, okay, let's look at the coalescent chart. Maybe there's something here that will explain all of this that the two charts together aren't. Maybe. Well, yeah, maybe. So here are the positive aspects, okay? So we've got Sun trining Jupiter, Sun sextile Pluto. Well, this is good. These are supportive aspects, so it makes them getting along with each other easier, right? So there's something. We've got the Moon sextile Uranus. Okay, well, that helps. That gives the relationship a little bit of sparkle and verve, a little like those sparkling bubbles in your drink. However, remember, Uranus is a freedom-loving planet, so this is great for ideas and experimental things and things that require communication, not so good for things like living together. They have Venus sextile Mars, so again, they'd make great dance partners. So this Venus sextile Mars, they're in sync and in rhythm. They don't really get in each other's way when they're trying to get stuff done, and they can be very supportive of each other's goals and ambitions. Okay, so, all right, well, that's great. This is great for a friendship. There's not a lot here for marriage. Remember, marriage is a very different animal. That's the reason we try to only get married once. Okay, so, well, and then we want to look like, okay, so what else is going on in this coalescent chart, right? Well, that's not good. All right, so Moon square Mars, you're going to get people who, there's constant friction in this relationship. Remember that thing I was saying about she's going to get really irritated by him just being himself? And he can't not be himself. We are all always going to be ourselves. You and that breathing thing, breathing in, out, in, out, in, out. Will you just stop that? Well, that irritation is repeated right here with that Moon square Mars. So there's constant irritation that just happens as part of daily life. And that's difficult because remember, he's got a quadruple stellium in Virgo. When he's irritable and he gets hyper irritable at some things, he buries himself in work, so he's just never around, which I suppose could explain why they managed to stay married so long, because it's easy to stay married to people you never see. I'm just saying. All right, and here we've got a Sun square Neptune. Ew, well, that's not ideal either. So a Sun square Neptune can theoretically get you married because you're marrying a fantasy or an illusion, not the real thing. with all its warts and moles and burps and bad smells and scratchy toenails. The problem with a Sun-Neptune square in a coalescent chart is that very often you're marrying a fantasy or an image of who you think the person is and not the whole reality of who they are, which is not necessarily the fault of the other person. I mean, we see what we want to see, and if we're in love with the idea of who someone is, sometimes it can be very hard to ratchet our expectations and our perceptions a little bit to kind of open the lens more to allow all of them to exist in our frame of perfection. You will see this a lot. Sun-Neptune squares, or the, well, maybe not the square, but as an example, right, the Sun-Neptune effect is a lot like people who marry or get involved with very beautiful people, right? And guys say this a lot. Women do the same thing. Don't kid yourself. Women do the same thing. Because I've seen women do it, and it ends the same for both genders when this happens. So there are some people who are so superficial that they can only get involved with really beautiful people, or worse, when they do get involved with somebody who's very attractive or that they feel is actually out of their league, they are so committed to the fantasy of who this person is because they're so beautiful that they literally cannot see that this person is a monster or is taking advantage of them or is cheating on them or is abusing them, or pick any number of horrible things you would never wish on your enemy. Well, maybe your enemy, but not, you would never wish on somebody you like. And they just refuse to see it because this person is, they're so beautiful, you know. And this is kind of the Sun-Neptune thing. Like, there is this image or fantasy of who they think this person is. And sometimes they can be so locked into that they can't open the lens wide enough to let the reality of the person fit in the frame also. And that, of course, leads to, naturally, disappointment and being taken advantage of and all sorts of other things that just are not fun, happy things at the end of a relationship. So right here, we're not liking that either. That's not good. Okay. Here's what I thought was fascinating about this chart, right? In the coalescent chart, and we're going to come back to this in a couple slides, Saturn makes no aspect. None. Saturn's not hooked up to anything else in the chart. So here's the thing, right? In a natal chart, in your birth chart, if a planet is not hooked into other planets, it kind of has free reign. It's like being home alone. There's no one to stop you from doing whatever you want. So typically you'll do whatever you want. You'll do lots of it, and probably to extremes and excess because, well, you know, there's no one to tell you otherwise. So planets without aspects tend to run unchecked, which can be problematic, right? With Saturn on aspect in a coalescent chart, this really, really emphasizes Saturn in this relationship, right? Well, that's kind of weird. So we're thinking Saturn is marriage and commitment, so maybe that's why they got married, because Saturn is doing the Saturn thing in spite of everything else. It's possible. If you believe in karma, we could say that, you know, Saturn is karma, so clearly this is a karmic relationship. And that's possible too. But in and of itself, what I would say is that Saturn by itself is not enough to get two people married. And if this were something that did get them married because of karma, right? They have some kind of karma they have to work out that's very special. Saturn, an aspect in a coalescent chart, especially with everything else going on between their natal charts, would be like Saturn as we define it for a prison sentence, not a marriage. So this, right off the bat, we're not getting off to a good start in anything we're looking at so far. So literally, for the love of God, why on earth did these two people get married? Well, boys and girls, I'm going to tell you, I'm literally hitting the end of the road with this. I'm literally at the bottom of the bag, and I have found nothing that makes any sense to me. So luckily, online, apparently, and this was sourced from People magazine, there is reference to the backyard wedding J-Lo had with Marc Anthony, and the reporter or the person who wrote the article specifically said that the bride walked down the path to the altar at 6:22 p.m. So we have a time. Thank God for the internet. So if she's walking down the garden path to the altar at 6:22, we're going to give her about a minute or two after that for when the wedding starts. So a minute or two is not going to make that much of a difference in this particular instance. So we went with the 6:22 p.m. that was recorded in the article. Now, They could be wrong, and we might be working with an erroneous chart time. And I have no way of confirming that. But so we're going to assume that the time they recorded is accurate, and we're going to go with that. So now, reaching down to the bottom of the bag, desperately searching for something to explain this, right? Let's use the wedding chart. Maybe there's something here in the wedding chart that makes sense. All right. So here we go. And this actually is pretty interesting because this is like a testament to the power of the time something starts. Because in theory, when it comes to astrology and things like relationships and marriage, right? Because relationships and marriage are two separate kinds of relationships. The time we start something, or the time we start a marriage, has everything to do with how we expect the marriage to go. This has nothing to do with how compatible we are. Many, many fine, decent, good people have married each other and had their relationships fall apart after marriage. It's not because there was something wrong with them or their relationship. It was because when they say marriage changes everything, it really does change everything. And in this particular case, I'm pretty sure that the wedding chart oh, we changed everything. But what it did was it took a big bag of basically nothing and and broken pieces inside the bag, no less, and turned it into some semblance of an operable, functional. I don't want to be insulting about it, but an optimal, functional, kind of bumping along version of a marriage. All right, so let's see what we've got in the wedding chart. So, and of course, in theory, the wedding chart describes the marriage, right? So here, okay, so for the wedding chart, the first thing that we have is we have 25 Scorpio rising, which means the ruler of the chart is going to be Mars, and Mars, yikes, is over here conjunct Saturn. Wario, so right there, we're getting off to a bad start. Mars conjunct Saturn, and it's in Cancer, for God's sakes, but Mars and Saturn together, on the one hand, will make you very disciplined and make you very committed, and literally they're going into this with an until death do us part kind of attitude. The problem is Mars and Saturn, other than being very disciplined, is also very unhappy. This is not, yuck, this is, zoinks, this is not a great aspect to carry if you have to have one in the chart. And if you do have to have it, it had better be really, really well aspected, because you need to be able to put that Mars Saturn to good use. Okay, so Mars and Saturn make a wide, make that loose trine Uranus. That's not great. I mean, because Uranus is freedom loving, Saturn is not. Mars and Saturn trining Uranus is good for innovation and work and building new things, new structures. So if they were trying to have an open marriage or some type of poly marriage or communal marriage or triad marriage, or pick any other progressive, unexpected, newfangled version of a marriage, that might have worked. But in this particular case, obviously that's not what they were going for, which means that we couldn't even utilize that wide trine Uranus. So that was not helping. Right? So the Mars Saturn also trines Jupiter on the 10th house. Now, with this, what this means, we have the chart ruler, okay, sextiling Jupiter on the 10th house on a superficial social level to the outside world. They would have made, or this would have made an opportunity for them as a couple to elevate themselves. So in some way, this would have given them the opportunity to rise up the ranks even higher. So rather than, just as an example, rather than Marc Anthony just having a trophy wife, because he's got a whole string of them, this man loves beautiful women, and no one is surprised when you've got that much money and that much success behind you. Of course, you want the prettiest, shiniest things that your money can buy, which includes partners. Listen, nobody's faulting him. If it were me, I'd have a whole team of husbands. Rotate them out, one for every day of the week. And then a spare just in case. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting carried away. So, we can't fault him for being what anybody would be in that position. If you've got that much money and power and success behind you, of course you want the shiniest, the prettiest, the best of whatever's available to you, whether it's houses, cars, vacations, jewelry, clothes. That's just the way it goes. We reward ourselves with these things. And typically in relationships, I mean, I hate to say it, but at that level, you're limited in your dating options. You know, we can't all be, who is Matt Affleck's? Matt Damon. We can't all be Matt Damon's marrying the waitress and finding true love. Like, we should all be so lucky. So for these people, their dating options are pretty much limited to a certain tier, you know, of society, right? Because these are the people they're coming in contact with all the time, which limits their dating pool options. And that means if your dating pool option is limited to a small group of people, of course you want the one that most reflects where you see yourself in that social tier. So for whatever reason, so again, she's not just a trophy wife because he's got plenty of them. This particular relationship with her would have acted as an opportunity for both of them, not just one of them, but for both of them to elevate their status even higher than it was before they came together. So where, just as an example, right? So Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez have a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. It literally makes them a charismatic power couple, which is why everyone, even now that these two are practically heading into like nursing homes, right? At least by Hollywood standards, you know, people are still crazy about the Ben and Jen love affair because it's that Jupiter-Pluto conjunction that makes them a power couple. Because together as a couple, they're a very charismatic couple. They have a very strong appeal just being themselves in a unit with each other. That does not make their relationship successful. It just means that together, superficially, they're a power couple because of that Jupiter-Pluto influence. In this marriage chart, right, with this sextile and Jupiter right here at the top of that chart, this also is the same thing as a power couple. In some way, shape, or form, this union between these two people elevates their social status in their groups even higher and makes them a power couple in that way, or a high status, high profile couple. So that could be good or bad depending on what their intentions are. Okay, so is there anything else good in this chart? Come on, we're searching here. Okay, now, so the Sun, Venus here is in Gemini, and it is, it's kind of wide, that moon, I wouldn't really use that. So, but it is definitely right there. It is definitely trying that Neptune. So there's a dreamy quality about the relationship, and it would have been very easy for them to fall into, you know, fantasies about what their relationship should be and kind of, you know, living like in your own little bubble. So it's great for artistic work, not so good for realistic work. So in terms of art and creativity and music, they would have been very good together and literally would have made beautiful music together. However, when it comes to the nuts and bolts of daily life, not so much. That's going to be a bit of a struggle, and we need other aspects to support that for this to make sense. So again, not seeing it, not seeing it. There's got to be something in here. I'm not seeing it. Now, Mercury here is at 1 Gemini, so it's a little easy to miss. So technically, we can also read this back as the late degrees of Taurus. If we do that, that means that this Mercury is still in trine to that moon. So we've got a Mercury moon trine. Now this is helpful. This is very helpful. And of course there's Chiron there. And the reason this is helpful is because that moon Mercury trine will make it easier for them to communicate with each other. Remember, Marc Anthony has difficulty expressing his feelings. And he tends to bottle things up or bury himself in his work. Like, he's just not going to deal with it. Like, it's just, if he ignores it long enough, it's going to go away. Or he'll figure out a solution when he's ready to come back and deal with it. That's pretty much his MO in life. But with a moon Mercury trine, it actually makes it very easy for them to communicate and express things with each other and have conversations and dialogue, which you absolutely have to have if you're going to have a long-term relationship with somebody. You have to be able to communicate with each other. You literally have to be able to speak a language that the other person understands. Because if you've had any kind of adult relationships in your life, you know you're both speaking the same language, but honest to God, the way they're not understanding you, you'd think you were talking in two different languages. So, and that naturally creates all kinds of problems because of the misunderstandings and the hurt feelings that weren't necessary. So with that said, these two are able to, air quotes, speak the same language with each other. So they're able to communicate effectively, and that's a good thing. Is it enough to build a marriage with? Absolutely not. But in terms of holding a marriage together, that will definitely be a huge lubricant and glue that will keep that well-oiled machine running a lot longer than it would with anybody else. Listen, sexual chemistry is nice, but at the end of the day, you got to talk to each other because you're only going to spend, what, a small fraction of your time in bed with each other, not sleeping. So the rest of the time you're spending together, man, you gotta be able to talk to each other, and you gotta like talking to each other. I'm just saying. Just saying. Okay, so all right, well, so far we're not seeing a lot. I'm still absolutely mystified. What on earth would bring these two together and keep them together? This is literally the longest marriage she's had, and she had kids with this man. There's got to be something that makes sense, or astrology means nothing. Right? Literally, I can't tell you how much I was ready to pull my hair out looking at this. So here's some other things. So let's just finish looking at the marriage chart, right? So that Sun Pluto is opposing, or Sun Venus in the marriage chart is opposing Pluto. So right there we know there's power struggles in this relationship. That's a problem. Oh my God, right? Everything's a problem with these two. Mercury is also squaring Uranus, so there's a whole lot of truth bombs that get thrown around the room with these two in each other's company. So there's a lack of tact or gentleness or sensitivity when they speak to each other. So they're brutally honest. Or tactless, meaning they say stuff right off the top of their head without thinking about it, no matter how much it hurts. That's a problem. But some people like it spicy, so if you're okay, if you're thick-skinned and you like a little bit of caffeine in your coffee, that Mercury Uranus will definitely keep you on your toes. But also too, now remember, he is conflict avoidant and he's hypersensitive and he bottles things up, so that those blunt, tactless truth bombs or speaking without thinking that get thrown around the room on a regular basis because of this aspect will lead to huge explosions on his end on a regular basis. That is not good, because when he explodes, you'll be lucky if there's anything left of you. Oh my gosh. Right? I'm still a huge fan of Marc Anthony. I didn't actually know that much about him until I pulled up his chart, and now I'm a huge fan of Marc Anthony. So I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Anyway, okay. I couldn't live with him, but I'm just saying. All right. So, and of course, Jupiter. We've got Mercury and Jupiter. It's kind of wide, just like a 9-degree difference here. It's kind of wide, but we're going to use it because it's going to set up a T-square, right, to Mercury and Uranus. So right here, we've got a Jupiter-Uranus opposition with Mercury acting as the leg of this T-square. So communication, how they speak to each other, what they say to each other, when they say it to each other, the things that they don't say to each other, words, language and how it's used. Communication and information and how it's used is a huge component of this relationship. It can be good and it can be bad, but ultimately the thing that they're both going to learn very quickly and acutely as a result of being in a relationship with each other is the power of words. I would give anything to be a fly on the wall during that marriage to hear the conversations that were going on. I can only imagine what was happening away from public eye. All right, so looking at the wedding chart also too, here's what we can see. We know, well, I know, I'm telling you, but the only people who really know are those two, and I don't know that they're going to tell us. They would have been trouble the first year of marriage. Literally, they wouldn't have been married a year before they realized this is a problem. We've got big problems here. But they would have worked through it as best they can, because, remember, they both got married with the absolute until death do us part intent. They intended to try and make this work to hell or high water, right? So, but that first year would have told them instantly, oh man, we're in trouble. This is a problem. Okay. Now, there would have been a change in the marriage in 2008, 2009, and lo and behold, there was. She had twins. Huge change in the marriage because now kids are involved. In year 6, okay, which is going to take us to about 2011, is when all this stuff that kicked off in the first year would have become irreconcilable differences at this point. Like there would have been no kidding themselves about what is and isn't working in this relationship. And here's what's fascinating, and I guarantee you they're never going to tell us because this is just public relations suicide, right? In year 7, when they got divorced, it was literally death or divorce as the options. Pick one. By the time they got to 2012, this marriage would have been in such a state of disrepair and such a level of potential explosiveness that I am not kidding you when I tell you there is the real possibility that they were looking at somebody in that house ending up dead. and not in an exaggerated way, or at least an emergency room, or we need to get divorced right now, like, because this is it. We have reached the end of the line, and there's nowhere good to go with this. Wow, wow, to be a fly on the wall. Like, and now here's the thing though, remember, this is all speculation because we don't know. So unless and until they confirm that these are the things that actually happened in the privacy of their home, away from the public eye, we have no way of knowing for sure that this is actually how this played out. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt and understand that, again, we don't know. This is all speculation. Okay, so now let's look at the wedding chart with their charts. Where does this wedding chart connect with their charts? Maybe there's something in here that makes some sense, right? Man, we're really fishing here. Okay, so we put the wedding chart up against their charts. This is literally not getting any better. I would call it the Titanic, but the Titanic took less time to sink, or took more time to sink. Anyway. We're going to start with her, and then we're going to go to him. So with Jennifer, the most important thing, so we don't know where we know where her moon is now. We did find a chart with her birth time, which is in another slide, but her moon is right here on the ascendant. So this is a very deeply personal, emotional event for her getting married, right? And would have had everything to do with how she feels about herself. And this, I'm pretty sure that if you go through some of the old interviews and stuff, like, this is very much a point in her life where she was very driven to salvage herself emotionally from disrepair, because she was really feeling like no one was ever going to love her again, kind of thing. Not a great reason to get married, but I'm just saying. Okay, so with her, with this wedding chart, we've got a giant T-square that's formed. I thought this was fantastic. Well, fantastic in an interesting sort of way, right? So in the wedding chart, we've got that Mercury, Jupiter, Uranus T-square. Remember, we just talked about that. And we talked about how communication and dialogue and the things that we say and the power of words are going to be extremely important in this marriage. And this is definitely something they're both going to learn, you know, the power of words and communication, right? Well, Chuchi Pie, this T-square that's all about words and how we speak to each other, it absolutely involves that Mars and Sagittarius of hers, right? Her Mars hooks right into that T-square. So Mars and Sagittarius is not known for being tactful or delicate or kind. Mars and Sagittarius is known for blurting out things without thinking about them, and also saying embarrassing things at the worst possible times, and, you know, making a joke out of it. They think it's funny because they're a little more thick-skinned than the rest of us. But it's a problem. It's a problem. Mars and Sagittarius loves to shoot off their big mouth and say things they probably shouldn't say in mixed company or around other people or in front of your mother. You know, pick the worst audience, right? Normally they're very funny, but listen, when it's something personal and deep and embarrassing or humiliating, you know, or any combination of those things, that's really a problem, right? So they think they're being funny, you think they're being a hurtful ass. Her Mars ties into that T-square. So I'm going to guarantee, well, I'm not going to guarantee, but if we could get them to confirm this, I would bet you good money that one of the things was a huge problem was her mouth, right? Because remember, communication and dialogue and that Mars and Sag. And also her lack of tact or consideration for his feelings or who they were around when she said something. So her inability to rein in her tongue and her indiscriminate sense of humor at his expense, because we're talking about the marriage here, would have been a huge problem in this relationship. And remember all the things we said about his nature. He's conflict avoidant. He'll ignore it, put up with it, ignore it, like literally until he's ready to explode. But at that point, he's accumulated so many hurts and injuries that it's an avalanche of, and then you said this, and you said, so it's like walking into a moving chainsaw. Like once he gets started and he brings up all the stuff that you've really hurt him with, there's not going to be anything left of you. So that could be where this giant grand cross involving her Mars is. I don't know. I wasn't in the marriage, and I don't know that much about them as a couple. Maybe you know something I don't, but that's an issue, all right? Now, so that right there, well, that's not helping. Why? Why are they married? Why did these people do this to each other? So, okay, here, if you look really close, right, that's Sun, Venus in the marriage chart conjunct her Venus. So here definitely indicates that Ms. Lopez, because remember her moon is on the ascendant too, Ms. Lopez would have gone into this marriage and with very romantic ideas and for very, very deeply personal reasons that had nothing to do with common sense or thinking or even compatibility. It was just a deep, deep need, and it brought her pleasure, and she liked the idea of being married, and it made her look good and feel good, and why not, right? All that, trying to be the perfect woman. And again, all of the things were really lighting up in her chart had nothing to do with common sense, compatibility, or thinking. Okay, so this is not good. We're not seeing a lot here to work with. We're just not. And also too, this giant T-square, I just want to point something out, right? This giant T-square here in the wedding chart involving her Mars, because Mars in Sagittarius is impulsive, right? Also, this absolutely underscores the likelihood that this was an impulse-driven decision for her, because we've got this moon, which is very emotional. We've got Venus, which again is about feelings and pleasure and, la, 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 things that make us look good and feel good, not things that make sense, right? And that impulsive, action-oriented Mars. So there's a very real possibility that this whole thing was impulse-driven for her. And again, I don't know anything about them as a couple or anything like that. So if you've got some scoop that you can share, please by all means educate the rest of us. I literally don't have enough time to go through the gossip rags from 10 years ago or 15 years ago to uncover this stuff. I got charts to do, folks. Got charts to do. So if you got the gossip, share it with me, please. Okay, all right. So now let's look at Marc Anthony. Well, what is this wedding doing for Marc Anthony? Why is he getting married? Hey. I'm not liking this either. I'm not liking this either. Now, remember that big old honking Mars-Saturn conjunction we were looking at? Yeah, that one, right? Well, it's conjunct his moon. So that's not great. That's not great. That's actually kind of, well, it's just not great. So with Mars-Saturn in the wedding chart conjuncting his moon, this marriage is definitely going to feel like a burden, an obligation, and a test in a lot of ways. So there's something very heavy happening with him in terms of personal development, and a lot of really painful things that he's going to have to go through and learn from as a part of this marriage, because Mars and Saturn on anybody's moon is not an easy position to have it. In fact, it's just painful, downright humiliating and painful. So that's not a good augury for a marriage. That's just not. And this is, remember, your wedding chart describes the marriage. So there's that, right? Okay, well, maybe there's something else. So I comb through the charts, and again, I'm not finding a lot. And what I am finding is this. The moon in the marriage chart is squaring Marc Anthony's Saturn. Oh, yay, yay, more fun than a Halloween apple with razor blades in it. Okay, so the moon Chiron squaring his Saturn, because again, Saturn is involved, right? So there's something, and because Chiron's down here too. This indicates that there is something about the everyday life of the marriage that's really, really going to underscore his Saturn issues. So his Saturn issues, he literally could spend his entire life never dealing with the Saturn issues. But this marriage, with this particular combination, really igniting and bringing to the forefront his personal Saturn, oh, he's dealing with his Saturn now. He is so dealing with his Saturn now. So for J-Lo, it's literally this marriage has everything to do with communication and the power of words and dialogue and the things that we say and the things we don't say, and being responsible, which Mars and Sagittarius is not fond of, being responsible for what comes out of our mouth and the actions that we take at the expense of other people. And for Marc Anthony, this is all about Saturn, 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 and he's really having a deep personal growth experience from this that will challenge him in all the deepest places he is the most sensitive. Yikes. Okay, so remember I told you I found a birth chart or with her time of birth in it? Well, it's out there. So if you go to, I'll put the sources down in the description box, but it's on AstroSeek. Apparently the astrologer there has a time of birth for Jennifer Lopez. And again, I have no way to confirm that this is an accurate birth time or not, so I'm going to assume that it is. And it looks like it makes sense. So we're going to go with that. Now, when we look at her chart and we look at the wedding chart on top of her chart, right? Remember that big old honking T-square we were talking about? Well, the other thing that's happening, right? Because here's the thing. This T-square involving that impulsive Mars of hers, right? Well, where is Mars in her natal chart? It's down here in the 5th. So also too, remember, everything you need you can get without the time of birth. The time of birth actually helps us narrow down more specifically and also helps us time events better. But you can get a lot of information without a time of birth. So we know that impulsiveness and her mouth, this is an issue in a relationship, but also too, look at this, it sits in her 5th house. So children would have been a huge issue on the table with her. Now what's interesting, because this sets up a grand cross, this can manifest in a couple different ways. It could either be him wanting children and her being reluctant to have them, hence that conflict, right? Because remember, Mars in Sagittarius is not fond of responsibility. Children are definitely a responsibility. The other thing with Jupiter and Uranus and Mercury, this could also indicate some difficulty getting pregnant. So there may have been some issues getting pregnant. Now she has had twins. I suspect that these may or may not have been, I mean, he's got all those Virgo planets. It's entirely possible he will produce multiples when he produces his children. But there's also the possibility that she may have had difficulty getting pregnant. And a lot of this would have had to do with, hang on, I should have done this before. I'm sorry, I'm thinking while I'm talking to you about this. This looks like it may have to do with fallopian tubes. Fallopian tubes more than her ovaries. So I don't think it's about her being older, which is certainly an issue because her, like Markle, both had these children later in life. But I think this may have actually something more to do with fallopian tubes. So maybe she had her tubes tied before this. She had to have her tubes untied. Maybe that's what it is. I'm not sure what that is. Okay, anyway, I'm not a medical astrologer, so I'm guessing here. Okay. The other thing is that Sun-Venus conjunction, we said, was all over her Venus, so this marriage is about what felt good for her. Well, it's in the 11th house. So not only is this marriage representing something that feels good for her and makes her look good, right? Does this marriage make me look fat? With it in her 11th house, it also expands her social circles, right? Expands her access to groups of people. And I'm not sure what this did for her professionally, but I'm sure it certainly expanded her. I don't know how much more you can expand Jennifer Lopez's brand or name, but it certainly expanded her contact with larger or more diverse or new groups of people. And this could have benefited her professionally because remember, we saw that Jupiter at the top of the chart in the coalescent chart, meaning that this relationship has the opportunity or ability to elevate her status and his, as a result of the union. Now, here's the thing I wanted to also look at. So remember this Moon Chiron down here and this Mars Saturn over here, and particularly that Mars Saturn, which is just a painful, painful place for something to be. So the Mars Saturn conjunction in the wedding chart sits in her 12th house. So there's a lot of, for her personally, there are a whole lot of deep hurts she's never going to discuss openly with people. These are very deep, private hurts. He knows and she knows, but they're not going to tell anybody else. And also, too, this Mars-Saturn, the marriage itself would have absolutely rested on the deepest, most insecure, most vulnerable parts of herself as far as her self-image is concerned. So there's a lot here that really made her uncomfortable and gave her night terrors, as it were, and it could be anything from having doubts about the marriage working, am I able to stay married? Am I the kind of person that people want to stay married to being a mother? Like, what kind of mother am I going to be? Like, pick your deepest, most private insecurity that you will not tell anybody. Maybe the priest in a confession booth if you're wearing a mask and changing your voice. That kind of deep secret. This marriage would have absolutely brought those things to the surface of her awareness. She may not have shared it with other people, but it's certainly up front and at the top of her mind. Now, with that Moon Chiron conjunction in his wedding chart, which of course means that there's a whole lot of growth and healing that's supposed to happen in an ideal world in their chart, it is occurring in her 6th house of habits and hygiene and routine. So she's got, because this Mars Saturn is here, right? So she's got Mars, Saturn in the 12th, which is the house of mental hygiene, and she's got Moon, Chiron in the 6th house, which is the house of physical hygiene. So physical health would have been an absolute concern or highlighted in this marriage, as well as her habits, her daily habits. So her routines and habits would have come under fire in this marriage and would have been up for review and revision. With that 6th house emphasized and that 12th house emphasized, there's a whole lot of deep internal house cleaning that she would have needed to do as part of staying married. Now, whether this is something she enjoyed doing or was conducive to her staying married longer, we don't know. But we do know that the marriage itself would absolutely have brought her to a position where she had to do a lot of psychological, physical, emotional, and social housekeeping, right? House cleaning, especially where habits and routines were concerned. And here's where it gets juicy, right? So this is Marc Anthony's chart. And remember, we do not have a birth time for him. So we're looking for the cross aspects in this chart. Well, we're going right back to where we started, which is the Saturn, 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 Saturn. Ooh, Saturn. Ooh, Saturn, 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 Saturn. All anybody wants to do is talk about Saturn. Okay, so first thing, the big thing, right? Remember that Mars-Saturn conjunction, okay, squaring his moon. Tough position, painful to have, not great for marriage. As a matter of fact, the only way I would want to see this combination together in terms of a long-term commitment is for a prison sentence, for somebody I really wanted to see suffer and pay for their crimes, like deeply, eternally, insufferably. That's the only way I would want to see these two things together. So Mars-Saturn conjunct his moon, all of his deep personal hurts and insecurities and pains, all the stuff from childhood, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of pick your poison here. It's all right there on the surface, and all those buttons are getting pushed on a regular basis because of this marriage. Yikes, yikes. So there's that. Now, the other thing is, but wait, boys and girls, we're not done. This Moon Chiron in the wedding chart, yeah, look at that. It is squaring his Saturn. So all that conflict avoidance that is natural for him, right? And that disliking of arguments and fighting and difficulty asserting himself, or wherever that happens to be in life. I mean, he's certainly not a doormat. He's extremely successful. It did not happen because he's a pushover. But somewhere in his life, he has difficulty asserting himself and standing up for himself. And this marriage would have absolutely pushed those buttons over and over and over again, like hitting an elevator button with a sledgehammer. Jeez Louise. With Chiron involved also too, it's like he would never get any rest from this. This is just the way the marriage was going to be forever. So in this sense, we're saying to ourselves, with this much emphasis on Saturn in the chart, because this is painful, this has to be about his Saturn. This has to be about a deep, profound, evolutionary growth opportunity for him to once and for all, and in no uncertain terms, master his Saturn. So in that way, now the marriage makes sense. And the marriage lasting as long as it did also makes sense, because it wasn't her, it was him that would not have let this marriage ended, right? He would have been in it for the long haul, because Saturn is not letting you out of those iron shackles. So with his Saturn just Saturn in general being heavily activated across the charts between the marriage and Marc Anthony's chart, he has some profound development and growth experience that were available to him as a result of being in this marriage. These would not have been happy, positive experiences. I mean, the children aside, but everything else about this marriage would have backed him into a corner and forced him to really work on both managing his emotions as opposed to avoiding them and burying them and bottling them up, as well as standing up for himself, without having to go through the whole wait, explode kind of thing that would be more typical of him. Ooh-wee. Now, I just want to point something out before I change slides. Now, also too, in his natal chart, if you look, his Saturn is quincunx his natal Neptune exact. So the quincunx or inconjuncts, depending on which word you want to use, are challenging. There is just no way around that. So the way I best describe an inconjunct or a quincunx is they are a catch-22, right? You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So with Saturn in Aries and Neptune in Scorpio, the catch-22 here is that on the one hand, he is conflict avoidant and he's learning how to stand up for himself in very specific situations, because it is extremely uncomfortable for him to have to bring the hammer down in specific instances. But with that Neptune in Scorpio, he is so sensitive. He's so sensitive. He picks, his radar is so well developed that he, one, appears to read more into things that have actually happened, because what's actually happening is he is seeing ahead in time. So he's seeing something as an offense that you didn't think was offensive, like, dude, I was only joking, or it wasn't that serious, or what are you talking about? It was just whatever, blah, blah, blah. But what's actually happening is that Neptune in Scorpio, quincunxing Saturn, has made him so sensitive, he's literally seeing this play out. A part of him is seeing this play out before it's actually reached its natural conclusion. So what you see or other people see as hypersensitive or overreacting now, if you give it enough time to play itself out to the end of the string, when you get to the end of the string, exactly the offense that he was offended about from the very beginning is actually how it plays out in the end. He's just, his timing is off, so he's getting offended at the first sign of what's to come later, which is confusing for other people. And also will make him feel like he's crazy and paranoid. So with that said, rather than expressing irritation or putting, bringing the hammer, putting his foot down on something at the very beginning of something, he will often find himself trained by life to let things go and let things go and let things go, because he's constantly second guessing himself and doubting himself, because he doesn't understand that he's seeing things before they're happening. And when he's getting offended about something that hasn't happened yet. It's probably going to if you give it enough time, but we're not there yet. So nobody else sees this except you. And that, if you've ever had this experience, will make you crazy. So here's what I want to say about Saturn in relationships and marriage, right? So in a lot of ways, this relationship is extremely good for him, or, well, depending on how he worked through his Saturn issues, had the potential to be, okay, let me rephrase that. In a lot of ways, this relationship was extremely powerful for him. Not necessarily good or bad, but powerful, because it offered powerful, potent opportunities for him to really do quantum growth and evolution as a result of having to deal with everything that came with being married to this person, in this lifetime at this time. Now, we could talk about Saturn being karma, and ultimately Saturn is karma, and Saturn marriages are karmic. And when you make contractual agreements, especially on an emotional level like this, right, with another person, it is a karmic agreement you're entering into. So, the question might be, well, was it karma they were burning off or karma they were creating? Doesn't really matter. What matters is that in that moment, in this relationship, in the confines of this Saturnine commitment, there are experiences and responsibilities and obligations that must be kept, and that sense of obligation and responsibility can feel like a burden, and can feel like shackles around your ankles and wrists. And it can also be seen as the discipline necessary to bring you out of an immature state into a more refined, controlled, mature state, right? So Saturn is a lot like boot camp. You go into boot camp undisciplined and unruly and youthful and arrogant and optimistic and full of energy and very little direction or self-control. By the time you get out of boot camp, you are a streamlined, trained, efficient, self-disciplined soldier. And it's only through those Saturn experiences that you can transform from one to the other. So the same thing can be said for the marriage, right? So he might have gone in one way, but ultimately, especially with all the Saturn being activated around his chart, this marriage was for him more than her. And this marriage was an opportunity for him to become the next best version of himself, which would only be possible through Saturnine activation, right? Through the boot camp, as it were. And given the amount of power and money and influence and things that he has at his disposal, I imagine he spends a lot of his time in his adult life being catered to by women. He's probably not accustomed to women being difficult, because only an idiot would be difficult if you've got somebody who's basically giving you everything you could ever want in life, right? And in this particular marriage, it's not about what he has versus what she has, what he has versus what she wants. It's not about that at all in this particular marriage. And this is why the Saturn is so powerful in this marriage. In this marriage, it's very much about who they are as people, separate from their stuff. Literally separate from the material things had absolutely nothing to do with the issues inside this relationship. This had everything to do with personal development and personal growth and maturing into better people as a result of hard experiences that teach you lessons. So, that, my friends, is why they got married and stay married. There's clearly deep, personal, meaningful lessons for him so he could evolve and become the next best version of himself. I mean, her too, but with him, deep, 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 powerful psychotherapeutic stuff. All right, so here's my reminder to everybody. Relationships are exercises to help you develop yourself so that you can become a better version of yourself. And that means that every relationship you have matters. Good, bad, and in between. Every relationship you have matters because it's an opportunity for you to learn about yourself, work on yourself, develop yourself, and become the next best version of yourself. It's not going to happen without a relationship. And if you think you're just going to go out and find a soulmate and instantly become a perfect person, you're out of your mind. If you want to have a soulmate, or you want to attract a soulmate into your life, or you want to attract a life partner, and by the way, they're not the same thing. You have to do the work on yourself to make yourself ready and prepared and worthy of a fantastic relationship. Because in order for you to have a fantastic relationship, you gotta know how to be in one and how to take care of one. And that's only going to happen with practice, practice, practice. All right. So, relationships are exercises to help you develop a better version of yourself. And karma is the lesson plan that comes with it. Well, hello, Casper. So we're going to complete this video with a couple of stopgaps on the way to Alex Rodriguez. And a stopgap, just so you know, is, by Webster's definition, an improvised substitute for something lacking, a temporary expedient serving as a stopgap, temporary or short term. So she had two relationships back to back after she left Marc Anthony, or after they left each other, and before she got involved with Alexander Rodriguez. And this is Casper, who's one of her backup dancers. And yeah, I would so get involved in that too. I would so get involved in that too. Wow. Did I tell you that she's got a real penchant for pretty boys? I'm just saying. And apparently the next one after that was the singer Drake. And I don't know what the deal is here, but apparently there was a bit of a thing with her and Drake and Rihanna was not having it according to the few resources I could find. Although, honestly, it's Rihanna. I don't imagine she was threatened at all, but maybe more amused, because between the two of them, they are both known to break up other people's relationships. So Rihanna might have, I'm only guessing, but if I were Rihanna, I might find it amusing that somebody was playing the same game that I typically play with other people. In any event, the thing with Drake ended very, very quickly. So Drake must have realized which side of the bread he was being buttered for him and by whom. And where he was most likely to find a long-term home, which would not have been with Ms. Lopez. And that's it. This has been Down to Earth Astrology with Primal Girl Wellness and Ms. Jenny. I am your astrologer. This is part 5 of 8 and the end of part 5 with Marc Anthony. The next video we do will be Alexander Rodriguez and Jennifer Lopez and all things relationship with these two. So stay tuned. That should be really revealing, especially considering everything going on right now with her and Ben and the return of Benifer. Okay. If you enjoyed this and you'd like to get notified that the next videos are coming up, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Also, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and let me know. And if you know somebody who is a fan of Marc Anthony or Jennifer Lopez and might find this video entertaining, by all means, share it with them. So that is it, my good friends. You have a Snoopy-Doo awesome day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.